Welcome to today's macro intelligence briefing. Look, we're going to bypass the comfortable propaganda right out of the gate today. We're tracking a synchronized realignment across sovereign debt, physical resources, and global demographics. And let me tell you, it is entirely distinct from the neat little narrative you're probably being fed.
Just listen to the consensus out there right now. Global supply chains and financial systems remain resilient and primed for synchronized recovery. Right. This is exactly the kind of hopelessly naive administrative fairy tale the Western press expects you to swallow this morning. It's a completely sterile projection, basically just designed to placate the markets and completely ignore the structural rot underneath.
So let's just completely dismantle that delusion, shall we? The real question we need to ask, the one literally staring back at us from the data, is this. What actually happens when the illusion of fiat, endless money just printed on demand, directly collides with the physical limits of reality? We're going to map out the actual global anomalies playing out today, cut through the noise, and focus strictly on the signal.
Which brings us to our first pillar, the illusion of fiat. When you actually look at sovereign debt, the global press narrative splits decisively in two. Notice how Western media stubbornly frames inflation as just a temporary policy adjustment, right? Just a mere hiccup in the business cycle for central bankers to manage. But if you actually ingest the press networks coming out of the East and the Global South, they are actively mapping out total, commodity-backed structural overhauls. They aren't sitting around waiting for a magical fiat recovery. They're out there building lifeboats out of tangible, hard value.
And here is exactly why they're building those lifeboats. $315 trillion. That's the global sovereign debt pyramid. We call it terminal because it's reached a point where it literally can no longer be organically repaid. You simply cannot taper or soft land a number with that many zeros attached to it. It operates like a massive gravitational black hole on global liquidity.
When you clinically compare the regional impacts of current interest rates, it becomes absolutely undeniable that the fiat structure is buckling under its own weight. You see the severe strain on fiat-heavy Western economies under these current rate regimes. And then you compare that to the relative resilience of commodity-rich Southern economies. It's night and day. The paper promises are cracking, while the players sitting on actual extractable wealth are rapidly repricing their leverage.
Okay, so let's move on to the second pillar, the physical reality. The smart money is already reacting to this fiat instability by completely redefining what a supply chain actually is. We're tracking an aggressive, highly cynical pivot away from abstract paper promises and straight toward hard, tangible assets. Honestly, forget the mainstream obsession with sterile manufacturing clean rooms and shiny microchip factories. Real global power now relies strictly on controlling the dirt and the shipping lanes. Strategic, sovereign control of raw mineral concessions and maritime choke points is really the only metric of autonomy that matters in this decade.
Lithium, cobalt, rare earths. This triad clearly exposes the massive divergence in strategic thinking right now. Eastern and Southern presses are explicitly tracking who locks down these primary resource pipelines. They're securing the actual bedrock of the 21st century economy. The West, on the other hand, remains bizarrely fixated on just subsidizing the factories that desperately need these very minerals to even operate.
The brutal reality really boils down to one simple question. What strategic value does a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility actually hold if you don't control the raw minerals feeding it? The answer is zero. It's just a billion-dollar stranded asset. Sovereign autonomy is dictated exclusively by whoever holds the keys to the maritime choke points and the extraction sites. Period.
And that brings us to our third pillar, the human engine.
Because look, locking down the minerals is only half the equation. You still need the physical labor to extract, refine, and transport them. And right now, we are witnessing an unprecedented labor inversion. Traditional industrial powerhouses in the global north are rapidly aging out of the labor pool. The working-age population is shrinking, welfare obligations are absolutely spiking, and the literal physical capacity to produce is waning. Contrast that sharply with the massive youth momentum currently altering production dynamics in the global south. The physical workforce is quite literally relocating.
Now, we have to address a prevailing and, frankly, pretty dangerous illusion that's heavily peddled in Western tech circles. It's this myth that software automation alone can somehow just plug this massive gap in the physical labor market. Look, algorithms cannot extract minerals. They don't maintain complex maritime logistics in corrosive saltwater environments, and they certainly don't turn wrenches on heavy machinery out in the mud.
Software cannot mine cobalt. It is a dry, undeniable truth.
You cannot code your way out of a physical logistics bottleneck. True global production requires a human engine, and right now, the demographic data proves without a doubt that this human engine is revving up entirely outside the borders of traditional Western industrial hubs.
So let's pull all of this together for the tactical macro synthesis.
When you synthesize these three pillars and finally pull back from the daily news cycle, a perfectly synchronized timeline emerges. In 2024, fiat debt reached terminal velocity. We are now heading into 2026, which is going to be categorized by a ruthless lockdown of tangible assets and supply choke points by non-Western actors. And by 2030, the demographic labor inversion will be fully baked into global production. It is a flawless collision of financial, physical, and human realities.
This is Onlyounesse. We provide intelligence, not news aggregation. The global board is being completely reset right now. And sticking to those comfortable consensus narratives will only serve to blind you to the actual mechanics of the transition. I'll leave you with this final thought to analyze today. Are you positioned for a world backed by physical reality, or are your strategies still built on paper illusions? It's time to leave the naive, administrative narratives behind. Ask yourself where your strategic blind spots are hiding in plain sight. Until next time, stay sharp and stay focused on the signal.